welcome back to another amazing episode of the Film Alchemist podcast, the show where we take the movies we love, break them apart to find out what gives them their magic. I'm your host, Josh Griffey, joined as always by my friend, co-host, guy who doesn't tip and just wants to be a professional.
Oh, which one was that one? But it's Alex Dandino. I tip.
All right, Mr. Pink, keep it to yourself. All right, guys, before today's excellent episode. See all these? I'm using the thesaurus today. I got called out. I'm thesaurusizing. Before today's outstanding episode, a little business, guys. It's official. We are on Patreon. That's right. Patreon.com/Film Alchemist Pod. It's the easiest, best, and most awesome way to help support the show. For as little as $1 a month, guys, and we do assure you, we appreciate every single dollar, and it helps us out. You can get in, meet the community, see what we're working on over in Patreon. And as you can, if you're able to, climb the Highlander tier ranking system, you can specifically select the movies you want to hear Alex and I discuss in a Patreon exclusive library. We have some amazing picks coming up, a lot of fun stuff. Alex and I right now, we're at the end of the year, we were crunching ideas. Because now you know we record these way in advance. To make the Patreon even better in this year, right? We know that all dollars are hard-earned, so we want to make sure that we're working hard to earn those dollars too. So again, that's patreon.com/Film Alchemist Pod, the absolute best and most appreciated way to support the show. Thank you for those of you who support us. You mean the world to us. Thank you for those of you who are about to as well. Go to the YouTube, right? Go to the YouTube. Put a mug to these colorized aliases we're using, right? Get to see our mugs. I look like Mr. Hasn't seen the sun in 5 years wide on the YouTube right now.
I look like Mr. Fat, so I think we're all good.
We'll have to fight over that name, I guess, too. So, yeah, the YouTube is Film Alchemist. The email, filmalchemistpod@gmail.com. You can find us on all the social media you're on. We're there, too. We're easy to get a hold of and love to hear from you guys. Also, if you want to help the show out, some free and simple and easy things you can do. Share us with your friends on social media. And make sure you're leaving us a 5-star rating and review wherever you find the show. It does help us defeat the algorithmic narcs we got rolling around in the midst of our capers, getting all up in our cahoots. Now that we've protected our cahootin', let's get to business. All right, we are balls deep in this month's curation. The pod had a rough day. I think is what we'll call this month. The pod had a rough day month. Selected by a patron, Edith. So you go over there. Again, that's patreon.com/Film Alchemist Pod. The dollar. That's what we love. The dollars. We'll steal them if we need to. All right. Today's selection, Reservoir Dogs. The first introduction to one Quentin Tarantino. A movie that, while small and streamlined and contained, to use some industry lingo, its effects were not contained. This was a massive ripple effect through the cinema scene of the time. You can honestly watch this film and just see its DNA and how it affected and started changing the way people were even writing screenplays after Reservoir Dogs came out. It'd been a long time, man, since I've gone back and watched this. Quentin Tarantino is pretty omnipresent in a film fan's life. And when I got to film school, right, we had that was one of the groups you were in, like the really hardcore Tarantino kids.
It's one of those posters that was on some student's wall. 100%.
Yeah. So you had your Coen brother kids, your horror movie kids, your Tarantino kids, right? The art house kids. You had your groups, right? My former roommate, one of my best friends in college, the man who actually designed our logo, Anthony Hugenboom, shouts out, wonderful guy, absolutely was obsessed with Quentin Tarantino. So I am very versed in Tarantino and have had these discussions a lot. I hadn't been back to the start in quite a long time. I got to say, going back and rewatching Reservoir Dogs was fascinating. It's not exactly the movie I remembered. Alex, what were your opening thoughts returning to Reservoir Dogs?
Yeah, it's interesting to watch now. I think that's the heart. I mean, that's the heart and soul of what this pod's going to be tonight is how fascinating it was to watch this time. Because, yeah, I've seen it I don't know. I can't even count on him. I don't have enough fingers or toes to tell you how many times I've probably seen this movie. just by sheer force of will, because it's just one of those movies you watch when you're in film school, are a film nerd. I think the thing I was most surprised by, or maybe just taken aback by, was like, for this being Quentin Tarantino's directorial debut, how fully formed of a filmmaker Quentin Tarantino came out as. I think that's like the thing that I took away the most from this, is that all of the things that we love about Tarantino movies have refined over the years and not changed. Like we all know exactly where certain things are going to go. We all know that there's going to be a big long scene where people are having a very intense, interesting debate. It's going to be great. The dialogue is the king. And I think what's fascinating is this movie comes out, and not only does it like completely change independent cinema, really. Like, I think that's like the most important thing, is like for the industry at large, this movie shattered. It was like this one, Slacker, and probably Clerks are the three most infamous like Sundance babies.
Well, the three at this time, right, were Clerks, Reservoir Dogs, and then El Mariachi, right? Those were like the real big ones.
El
of
Mariachi
that
is like for sure. Like those are the three at this time. So I would say like this one though changes the landscape of cinema so much, especially because this is what makes Sundance as we know it today. Like, to be honest with you, like there's nothing about what happens with Reservoir Dogs that doesn't completely change the industry and the way we view independent films, independent financing, independent directors themselves. And not only that, you're watching someone who has come out, and we've seen it change over the years, but this is literally a man who's just mastered directing on his first go around, really. Like, not just mastered directing, but mastered the kind of movie he's going to make for the next, we're up to like, what, 30 years, 20 or 30 years now?
Yeah.
Like, this is the kind of movie. And not only that, how many times have you seen this copycatted at this point? Like, even today,
well, yeah,
we're still seeing this kind of thing.
I think that's the thing. I think Tarantino might be the most copied filmmaker. And a lot of what is funny about that to me is that Tarantino himself is just such a student of all these mediums that a lot of his stuff is just remixing, right? Like remixing famous images. I
don't think people realize how much he's sampling when he's
like a master. Like, what's that guy everyone likes? Dead Mouses, right? Like, that's what Tarantino is of the cinema, right? He's like a fucking orgy DJ, right?
He's a master
they're not orgies.
sampler.
What are they called? Raves. Not orgies, raves. A very different setup for DJ.
Very different, yes.
Different smells, different locales. No, but you can see a lot. I think what I was struck by is how stripped down this was. I think in my mind, this film was one of those kind of epic movies I found at a young age, right? This is when you started to hear that thrown around, right? The cinema of cool.
Yeah.
Right? Oh my God, it's just dripping with coolness. And so it became this big monumental thing in my mind. Watching it again today, it's just not. And I think what you find is that I think it's the screenplay that really rises through, right? Because there's a lot of, it's just a lot more still at a lot of times than I think I remembered, right?
Yeah.
And it has a lot of those. Like, this is the thing, right? Imagine that opening scene in the diner, right? Mm-hmm. We're sitting here with these violent, murderous criminals, right? They're going out to rob a diamond store, but they're just meeting up at a cafe. If you've lived in LA, we all used to go to cafes like that all the time, right? To have script meetings, whatever.
NoHo Diner was yours and mine.
NoHo Diner, yes. We've all been there, right? And this movie starts out, and it's not like a Michael Bay film where we start out with like a cool whooshing around, like showing them working, right?
No,
look at them work. They're sitting around and just arguing about the quality of dick that Madonna got in Like a Virgin and tipping. And so what it is he's doing fucking bit comedy through the mouth of just a hangout with these violent criminals. So instead of a movie that sets them up as outlaws, even lovable outlaws, anything like that, they're just telling us they're just you. They're you, the audience. Come sit at the table with these. Like, imagine if A Dog Day Afternoon with Pacino, right? Imagine if you just went to Denny's with him and we're just shooting the shit over Moons Over Miami, right? And
that's what
that idea, though, changes because then all of a sudden you can hear like 10,000 screenwriters just start jerking themselves. Oh, my God, I can just write my diatribes
Yeah. But that's exactly what ends up happening.
Yeah.
That's exactly what ends up happening with the entire genre. Like, you know, Kevin Smith is a great example, takes it for a ride, man. Like he saw Slacker, but like there's so much imprint of like everybody samples this now. Like it is what it is. Like Quentin Tarantino even samples himself. Like how many like even in the next movie Pulp Fiction, he does the exact same setup at the very top of the movie. Yeah. Death Proof is always the one that I go to because that scene, there's a diner scene in Death Proof that is almost identical to this. Like they talk about music again. Like it's this fascinating. It's fascinating to see it in the context of this is Quentin Tarantino's first fucking movie, and this is the setting of the table for 30 years of filmmaking.
Well, it's the charming element of independent film, right? Is that the voice of the independent filmmaker becomes very present, right? And I know a lot of people talk about, you know, that kind of thing, right? The French New Wave movies were about a moment, right? Or an emotion, right?
Right.
And then I remember Tarantino did this rant somewhere I was watching, right? Where he talked about, we used to tell the best stories, right? Those were like moment or emotion movies. And in the 80s and 90s, we got caught up in these big tentpole IP blockbusters. And all of our movies became about a situation, right? I think his was, you know, some movies do that really well, like Speed, right? Mm-hmm. Speed is you take a movie situation and you do it to the best it can be done, right? And he has this wonderful thing, but he's like, we forgot stories, man, where you just sit with characters and watch it unfold, and there's twists and turns, and you don't know everything, right? And you're kind of learning as the movie goes. And I don't know that Reservoir Dogs is necessarily that, right? Like it's some like naturally, organically unfolding story or this and that.
Right.
But what it is, right, is it's that opening scene where it's just, hey, instead of them talking about whatever the fuck, right?
Right.
Just have them have the conversations that we have. And I remember the movies that I fell in love with, because in the 90s, I was a young, like becoming a teenager, right? So by the end of the 90s, as we're heading into film school, I was obsessed with any movie that had people just talking like we did, right? Arguing about Star Wars and Clerks, or arguing about Madonna lyrics in this movie. Right. That kind of stuff meant the world to me. The tip argument is one that I've still had this debate all the time with people, right? About the current state of tipping and how insane it is. Because my wife gets mad at me that I tip everywhere I go. Because she's like, what the fuck? She's like, you don't tip at Starbucks or wherever. Not Starbucks, like McDonald's. I think I tipped. That's funny because in this movie, they're like, you don't tip McDonald's. Like, McDonald's asks you for tips now. Right, I tipped at a Taco Bell, and Amy got incensed with rage with me. And I was like, the guy was staring at me like I was a piece of shit. Like, he's doing a terrible job making my 18 chimichangas or whatever the fuck I ordered. Walking out of there with a fucking grocery sack of tacos. I'm tipping the guy, right? And so, that little touch, right? And again, it's just this little fucking couple minute long scene at the start where we feel like we're part of the gang. And when you do that, like, fucking walkout, right? That super cool walkout intro. Mm-hmm. And then we just fucking hard cut into Mr. Orange bleeding everywhere. And you're like, oh, fuck, we're doing a movie.
That is, I think, the really fascinating cut in the movie. Like, all of it's great, you know, but, like, to disarm your audience. And again, this is what I mean when I say fully formed filmmaker. Quentin Tarantino knew exactly what he was doing, where he disarms his audience with this, like, clever diatribe about, and I do this shit all the time. Like, I don't even realize I've done it at this point, but it's like, I love talking about like 90s pop music as being like some of the most sexually charged stuff you've ever heard in your life. I have an entire thing about Genie in a Bottle, what it actually means, and all this stuff. Again, it's one of those things, like we all have this, like we all have one of those bits though.
Yeah.
To hard cut and know not even hard cut, but like it starts with the audio, which is awesome. Because you're just like, if you came into the movie blind, like having no idea what the movie was about, had no idea that these guys were fucking, they're all dressed the same, except for like Nice Guy Eddie and Joe. So you're like, something's like, they're a band maybe or something like that.
You're just like the Men in Black are really into this dick conversation. Right?
But it's like you have
MIB went hard.
If you come in blind, you have no idea what these guys are talking about. You have no idea what these guys are about to do. So when it hard cuts and it like you just hear like Mr. Orange, oh God. And I mean Tim Roth is just like it's
the black you start to hear I'm gonna die.
Yeah.
I'm gonna die in the black.
It's one of my all time favorite, just like childish wails of pain is like Tim Robbins. Oh, yeah.
He's going for it, dude. But
And
that whole
fucking-
thing, right? This is like one of the brilliant things in the script, right? So we're disarmed. We're doing the, I'm going to die. So already before we even see anything, then you cut to the white car just covered in blood. Holy
Covered
shit.
in blood.
And Harvey Keitel's sitting there doing like lines, right? Like long. Are you a doctor? What? Are you a doctor? And it's like, Jesus Christ, like, hush. Just hush your mouth and drive faster.
I always
right?
I always forget. You're gonna be okay. You're gonna be okay.
Yeah. But
The
that's, I mean,
singing.
so you
I love
admit, and you're amateur, and you're like, Jesus Christ, like, get the script out of your face. Get this man the help he needs to get saved. But that's what it's just this blend that he manages to do. Somehow Tarantino can keep us in those tense life and death situations. Right. And the writing is just sharp. And I think, honestly, one of the things you see early on is that for his first movie, the cast that he is managing to get, because I believe the story goes, right, he had written this and Natural Born Killers.
Yeah.
And when he got the chance to sell, he told, I can't remember who the fuck he told, right? But it was, you can buy one, and I'm going to take the money from the sale and go make the other, right? And they bought Natural Born Killers, and he went and made Reservoir Dogs with that kind of stake, right? And I don't know how he would have made Natural Born Killers, right? The same way, because Reservoir Dogs is so fucking condensed. It's actually,
it's like,
it's another thing that everyone, like,
a really
everyone who writes
specific
indie fucking movies now, you're like, that's what you
well,
wish
this
you
is
could
like,
write.
this is the formula for indie movies, which is like, what do you have at your disposal? You have I know I can get a warehouse, and it's interesting, like, for not being Robert Rodriguez, this is the same spirit of like Rebel Without a Crew. It was like, I know what I can get, I know who I can get. And like originally,
you don't have to set dress that fucking place, right?
He had, I mean, the budget was so low, they had those guys like bring their own clothes. Like, that's what Chris Penn actually wore, which is hilarious. But like, originally,
way to just know your role. Way to know the assignment.
This was going to be a $30,000 movie.
Yeah.
This was going to be a $30,000 movie with a 16mm camera and like just his friends, including Lawrence Bender, who's like been his producer forever, who's going to be nice guy Eddie. He got a phone call from Harvey Keitel, and Harvey Keitel says, "I don't want to just be in the movie. I also want to produce it."
Yep.
And he got $1.5 million to make the movie, and that's how he ended up doing it.
But what is wonderful is you watch it now and you're like, with the technology at our disposal, it feels like a movie. You're like, I could shoot that fucking movie for a pretty reasonable amount. Like, me and my friend John, we just finished our newest script, right? It's like a little fucking indie comedy drama, whatever. And you're like, this is probably going to be very expensive to try to do. Somehow Reservoir Dogs feels like a big action thriller to me. But just done on like such a fucking shoestring budget.
It's because of the way it's cut, for one, and because, and this is like the most important thing about the single location, and a lot of people get this wrong and like, actually I wrote a movie when we were working at Wipeout. I wrote a script for you with a single location, and I realized like a year later, after we like didn't do anything with it because it was just like it was shitty, but like we also like realized. This is the most important thing about the single location in Reservoir Dogs, is that all of the tension exists within the room because we have no idea what's going on outside. There could be 30 cops swarming the place. There could be nothing going on. Like, the whole day could be blown. All the tension exists inside that location, and the outside world is still like encroaching. It's a really important and fascinating thing. And that's what Tarantino understood before anything else, is that the reason the single location works is not for like quick cutting or anything like that, because the camera work is very fluid. It's very quick. It's not quick. It's just very emotionless in a lot of ways, but then it's emotional when it needs to be emotional. But the tensity of that room is just, you could cut it with a knife. It's insane.
Right. Well, I think that's beautiful. Like a triple dynamic, right? Is one of the things he does, right, is I think one of the clever things is how Mr. Pink is constantly telling them they need to leave the room.
Yes.
And they just can't, right? And then they do start to leave the room, right? Because a lot of these stories, they don't let you leave. But they still keep it tight, right? And then just wonderful actors delivering a wonderful script, right? It's hard to do this movie if you don't have Harvey Keitel and Steve Buscemi screaming at each other.
Yeah.
Right? And then Michael Madsen just comes in with a soda and just has this fucking all-timer entrance, right? Like, when you have that kind of heft and talent at your disposal,
Right.
you could fucking sit and linger a lot more, right? And I think that's one of the wonders. But one of the things that is... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
And Buscemi at this time, too, is still young enough. Like, I don't remember if he had done Living in Oblivion yet, but this is like... This, to me, is like... This is the Steve Buscemi role that we got through the 90s that everyone wanted him to do through the entire... Like, he was the fucking... He's the jumpy guy. And you got him to do it. But I think what's really important, and this is like... Because Harvey Keitel is Harvey Keitel. You can't do... Harvey Keitel does one thing. And it's be Harvey
Michael
Keitel.
Madsen as well, yeah.
Michael Madsen does one thing.
But they're so good at it.
They're so good. Like, that's the thing. Like, you
could argue that Tom Cruise, Denzel, like, a lot of guys are doing, like, mostly one thing.
They do mostly their one thing. Steve Buscemi, though, is, like, the key for this because he's the character actor who's been hired for this movie. So, Steve Buscemi, you know, like, we've all seen now as he's gotten older, he's much more mellow and he's done a lot of more, not, like, dramatic and much more measured work. When he's doing this scene, like all these scenes, but I love his like constant need to not just like sniff out the rap, but we got to get the fuck out of here. Mm-hmm. Like, I absolutely adore how, and he punctuates every single line almost with, we got to get out of here. Let's get out of here now.
Yeah.
We do not need to be here anymore. This is a horrible idea.
Yeah. And that's playing
really
into what I think is the most important part of this film is how much of it we never see.
Yeah.
Right?
It's
so
really
right off the
important
bat,
we
we don't see the fucking gut shot. We don't see the actual crime at the store. He comes in, and they had this almost, is it Rashomon or Yojimbo, where they tell the 3 stories of the crime? I think it's Yojimbo, right? Or no, Rashomon.
No, it's Rashomon.
Rashomon. So we see that, you know, he's like, we're fucking set up. And he's like, maybe we were set up. Where were you? And Steve Buscemi's telling his story, right, of him running down the streets of what looks like Burbank, right? Somewhere in the valley. Shooting it up, running away. And this is a scene that feels like a more traditional, like, movie scene, right? And what's funny is because we haven't seen anything to this point, we're writing the crime in our mind, right? Based on the little tidbits we have. The moment you see that, that's the first time they're giving us information. And they're sinking us deeper into the psyche of the criminals because my first thought was that seems like horseshit. That doesn't seem like how he would have escaped getting out of the bank, right? So now we don't even believe him. So the movie's weaponizing the fact that our minds are racing trying to fill in all of these empty visuals, right? We learn that about Mr. Blonde, right? We learn about Mr. Blonde before we ever see him. And what we hear from him by the time he comes in with that soda, we've already done an enormous amount of this work for the film. And that is one of those, it's so hard to not, because that's the thing. All screenwriters are taught, right? Show, don't tell.
Right.
This is the movie that says, fuck that. Right? And in a way, it lets us show ourselves something much better, right? I think it's amazing how little they get away with showing us by the end of the film.
Well, I mean, everyone's account of it is so harrowing. I think that's like, but because of that, I don't know. It's really fascinating to me. No one seems to be straying from the actual account. Like at the very beginning, when Mr. Pink corrects Harvey Keitel, like he corrects me because that's not what happened. Like, I think that's a really fascinating thing. And it's a really interesting, like, that's like the inverse of Rashomon is like all these guys are actually trying to get their story straight, not trying to tell the truth. They just all want to have the same story. And like, even Michael Madsen ends up saying, like, this is what happened. Like, I know exactly what happened. Like, I don't, like, him not disagreeing with the facts of the case is, like, a really important thing because, again, that's the signal that we all know Michael Madsen, that we all know that Mr. Blonde's out of his fucking mind. Like, there's nothing about that. And what's interesting, like, it's not even, like, you could do this movie. It's always, I always forget we have, like, the cutaways too. They're, like, before.
I forgot how much of the cutaways there were.
I did too. And like, again, it's such a strange thing because like I understand kind of, but I also feel like it's fully unnecessary.
This feels like we need to get to feature length I would argue,
right?
I don't
bit.
think there's
Just
a cutaway, right? Like when you cut away to Mr. Pink telling his version of what happened.
Right.
That feels important to me, right? When you cut away to Mr. Brown and Mr. White and Mr. Orange shooting their way out, right? Mr. Brown dies. You watch Mr. Orange, watch Mr. White kill 2 cops. That feels like it matters, right? Because it's involved in the moments of this day.
Right.
Every flashback that does not fit that for the most part feels like a waste of our time.
I kind of think so too. Like, and it's
really... I think because the Mr. Blonde one is useless. That's where Tarantino's just like, I've got some horrible fucking shit to say that won't age well. Let's get this out of our system, right? So we won't even address that, right?
I got some horrible shit to say that only I will be allowed to say in 30 years.
Yeah, because when the old man just goes, enough of this shit, I'm tired of it. And I go, me too, Jesus Christ. My 2022 mind can't fucking take the barrage of fucking filth that you're saying. But we get that out of the way, right? The Mr. White one offers almost nothing except for linking us to Alabama and Marcellus Wiley and like this Tarantino verse, right? Offers me nothing of value.
Almost
right?
it.
I think you could argue that the Mr. Orange part works pretty well.
The Mr. Orange part works well though because it comes at the end. It comes after it comes almost as like a footnote to what's actually happened. And I think that is the one cutaway that works.
But it's also, it feels like that's what, 3 or 4 scenes, if I remember right, instead of just like one little cutaway.
Right. It's an actual part of the story it's a part of the story that we need to know to fully understand what's going on. And I'm fine with that. Like that's the part part of those are the only cutaways that make sense to me. The rest of it again is like a condensed narrative inside one room essentially where these guys are arguing over who's a rat. I think once I
always wonder though what it would have looked like had they not, because I love the Commode story. I like the idea that we watch him from script to rehearsal to telling the guys at a bar to then doing his own Mr. Pink cutaway reality scene, and then they do like almost Spike Lee version of him like narrating within the story with the cops. It's very hyper realized, right? There's something about that was really fun to watch, right? Again, I think this is one of those, sometimes when you're making a movie like this, you're just like, put all the cool shit you got up there,
right,
and see what works, right? And at the end, when Mr. Orange leaves his apartment, right, he grabs his coat and he looks in the mirror and he's like, you're not going to get hurt today. They're going to believe everything you say because you're fucking cool, man.
Right.
That's an interesting character moment, right? This guy who thinks these guys are cool, he's getting pulled in too deep, whatever. I thought that was fine, right? Did I need that to know a lot? Because I feel like once he shoots Mr. Blonde, that was a, oh, fuck moment. Like an audible gasp the first time you see it, and you're like, holy shit, this is great. I feel like I learned everything I need to know, right? I know he's undercover. I know he must be good at his job.
I think you're onto something about it, like we got to fill like 90 minutes essentially.
Yeah.
Because that tells you everything you need to know right there. Like there's absolutely nothing that happens in any of the cutaways that is 1,000% necessary to understand what this movie is about. You find out who the
I would argue
right
0% necessary. 0.
Other than the opening of the movie, there is absolutely nothing that happens outside the warehouse that makes it necessary to
I'm saying once we start a guy shot in the belly, it was funny to see
0
that he got shot by the lady who they carjacked and not in the crime as we were led to believe, right?
Right. That is the Rashomon stuff that I think it's just like that to me is like seasoning on top of this,
to me it felt a little bit like loading, right? Where he's like, fuck, I've got like a 60-minute movie, but I think I'm really good at this. Like, what if I just fucking hung something really cool? Yeah.
Absolutely.
And Mr. Blonde, swing and a miss. Pretty bad, uninteresting stuff, right? Mr. White, also pretty uninteresting stuff. But with Mr. Orange, now we're getting somewhere, right? Like that is real work that they're doing there, and it's great. But again, stuff like that is keeping us away from what we want to see, right? I feel like the whole movie, you desperately want to be in that warehouse. When Michael Madsen, when they leave, right, and it's just him and the cops, and he goes, alone at last. Every fiber of my body stiffens, right? And you're just like, oh, fuck. Like, I know what's happening, and I'm still fucking scared. Yeah. He's so wonderful. That's the scene of this movie to me.
Well, yeah, I mean,
it's a fucking stunner.
It's not only that, it's this, like, deeply menacing moment. Besides that, it also does this Tarantino thing that I think is really important and is echoed through every other movie, which is it's taking this really out of context pop culture moment. Like they talk about it, like and during the diner scene they talk about K. Billy's Sounds of the 70s. Like, isn't that just awesome, you know? And by the way, Stephen Wright is like the perfect voice casting. I mean, he's just the greatest.
Yeah.
But, you know, they're talking about it and you're like, who the fuck? Again, it's one of those amazing things that if you go in blind, you're like, who the fuck cares about any of this? This can't be what the movie is about. Where this band's just going to walk around talking about tipping people in K. Billy's Sounds of the 70s. When it's a wraparound like that, though, and reassigns Stuck in the Middle with You as one of the most sinister odes to just torture, that's masterful filmmaking. That's recontextualizing something in a way that only Quentin Tarantino has ever done.
Well, it's the part, too, because I feel like a lot of movies find ways to do these kind of sinister, what you don't see is really fucking scary things, right? And people love taking innocent-seeming things and layering them on top of acts of barbarity, right? And I think there's something to Michael Madsen just knowing what he did at that bank and never seeing it, right? Showing up with the soda, not really caring. He tells the guys, like, hey, I'm going to torch you. I don't really care. I just think it's fun. And it's, you know, the fucking there's a scene, though, when he pulls the gun on him and he's just, like, moving it and, like, kind of laughing and then starts dancing. You're like, oh, my God. Like, he wasn't kidding. That wasn't I'm here to torch you. I'm going to do a tough line. He's really getting off on this.
This is not like because the rest of the guys are trying to get information. This is about fucking.
They're pulverizing him and tough talking him. And he's like, no, you're just my fucking plaything. This is about torture. Yeah. And the scene, though, when he goes to saw the ear off and the camera just floats up, right? Almost as if the operator has walked away, right? And it just holds on that empty space. And then he stands up in the empty space, now fucking bloody and holding the ear. It's just one of those, again, it's another, they don't have to show us the fucking cutting, man. Like, there's nothing they'll show us that's as scary as that empty frame for a minute. And it's just, I think that's the kind of stuff that he got really well, right? Because I think a lot of times Tarantino gets knocked, and this film has a lot of that kind of ultra violence flavor, right? When Eddie shoots the cop, we're shooting other cops, everyone's shooting each other, whatever. I think the knowing when to not show it is such an important talent.
I think that is
moment
more
not getting the close up of the ear is just, and again, it could just be like a simple.
But it's
not going to look right. It's
so grotesque. Addition. I don't know. I read that. I was reading that Wes Craven and Rick Baker walked out of a screening for this movie, and Quentin Tarantino asked Rick Baker. And Rick Baker was like, "It's actually a compliment. Like, neither of us could handle what you were doing on screen because it looked so real. Like, it was so uncomfortable to watch."
They filmed the ear getting sliced off?
No. Like, this was during a screening of the movie during a film festival.
Nice.
And because, like, it was just like the sheer novelty of this. And again, like, we've come to know, like, we're now at a point in our Quentin Tarantino lives where, like, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood literally has him beating up hippies, which, again, one of my all-time favorite scenes now, because beating up hippies is hilarious.
Look at you being the fucking man now.
But like, that scene is so ridiculous. Like, it's so ultra violent and bizarre. You're like, okay, so we're just doing Looney Tunes. This is the first movie that this man's put out, and now it's just like part of the shtick. But like, imagine not having any frame of reference for Quentin Tarantino and seeing Reservoir Dogs and be like, holy shit, this guy is fucking sadistic.
Well, like, you see this scene and you see the footprints that lead you to the opening of Inglourious Bastards, which to me is inarguably the greatest thing Tarantino's ever put on film, right?
Agreed. 1000%.
That opening with the milk drinking in Hans Landa. I mean, and this is not to be rude, I don't think Tarantino will ever come close to that scene again.
It's
It is
I mean,
one of the
for
all-time
me,
greatest moments in any movie I've ever seen.
I mean, Glorious Bastards is my favorite Tarantino movie, but that is the best scene he's ever made for
Yeah.
sure.
I think just for fun value, I really have always loved the Kill Bill 1 and 2. They're just right in the wheelhouse of shit I used to love. But what I'm saying is that Hans Landa scene, right? What was wonderful about that is it is so taut and loaded with dread in
Yes.
what is just absolutely innocuous conversation, right? You just see a Nazi uniform and you're scared. But it's mostly just about milk and this and that. And then when you see the stakes, right? And it's true dread. This scene with Mr. Blonde truly captures dread and is terrifying, right?
Right.
And I think that is what gets lost in some of the other moments throughout his filmography.
Sure.
Which is not to say that's what he's going for in every scene, but,
No, but
the ability on your first film to fucking make this scene that
Absolutely.
powerful, stunning.
It's superb. Again, like, it's so weird and rare. Like, again, like, we think about the great filmmakers of today. Like, you think about, like, the Coen brothers, like, I don't know if anybody else, like, I love Paul Thomas Anderson. I remember watching Hard Eight, or it was originally called, Hard Eight's the first movie he put out. It was originally called Sydney. I remember watching that and being like, I see the husk of, like, how great this guy is at making movies. Because, like, I had seen Magnolia and There Will Be Blood and Punch Drunk Love and the other movies he's made before I saw Sydney. And I'm like, I see the pieces. Like, I see, like, the casting and understanding how his camera, like, I understand what he's trying to do. I cannot stress this enough. Like, Quentin Tarantino making Reservoir Dogs as his first movie is like a 1 in a trillion shot of a director coming out and being almost fully formed, knowing casting, knowing his shot selection, knowing exactly the vibe he's trying to put out. It's honestly incredible.
Yeah, that written and directed by Quentin Tarantino title card might as well have been a fucking stamp.
Yeah.
You know, like, Jesus. It's funny because I recently just watched Duel. I had never seen Duel, right, from Spielberg.
Yeah.
And I was like, that also has to be... I know, obviously, the one everyone will say, like, Orson Welles made Citizen Kane in his first movie out in his 20s. I don't think anyone will ever go that hard on their first movie. But, like, when you see that, or you see Duel, right? Like, Spielberg's Duel is a fucking masterclass in filmmaking for his first movie. This is the same thing, though, right? And that's like... When you're at that level in your first movie, you have such an absolute grasp on not only your voice, right, but your visual voice.
Right.
Visual language to me is sometimes so much harder to capture over the length of a film, right?
I think visual, and look, Quentin Tarantino, there is no one who writes a better Quentin Tarantino movie than Quentin Tarantino, and many people have tried.
Tons of people still try.
Tons of people still try. And, like, not only that, we've seen people direct Quentin Tarantino scripts.
You could argue that me and you have tried, right? We've all gotten that, we could write a Tarantino
I will
scene.
make the argument we've tried many times, and it's been not great.
It's not as easy as it looks.
It's a very specific tonality, and to know that about yourself and know full well, like, you think about Natural Born Killers, True Romance. These are 2 movies that he wrote that were directed by other people. They are so redistributed into the vernacular of the directors that made them, particularly Natural Born Killers, because Oliver Stone's Oliver Stone. It almost stops being any sort of, there's no written by Quentin Tarantino in Natural Born Killers for me. It's so specifically Quentin Tarantino it's so specifically Oliver Stone that when Quentin Tarantino makes a movie, you know exactly what you're getting. I think that understanding, not your brand, because that's very, like, 2020 speak, but understanding...
when you knew in the 90s to vertically integrate all the way from the tippy toes
understanding that you are the only one who can properly direct your scripts is a really fascinating thing to know to see out the gate.
Well, you can see him testing, like, I can write, I can direct, I can act, and he's like, maybe not as much the acting. Like, he's not even a bad actor. He's just an actor. I think it's just, and I think that was one of the wonderful things of this kind of 90s Renaissance, right? Is instead of everything being so departmented and studio and this and that, you just saw these guys that just had something.
Yeah.
And so, you know, your Robert Rodriguez and Kevin Smiths and Tarantino's, not a brand per se, but you felt like you were seeing into their minds.
Yeah. You were seeing how
in a way that a lot of bigger films don't let you achieve.
You were seeing what they saw as people like us who were growing up watching movies, loving movies, absorbing movies. You saw this is how they absorbed these movies. And Quentin Tarantino absorbed very specific movies. It's why he's bought half of the one-screen theaters in town, because quite frankly, like, that's where he wants to show those movies. Like, there is at the New Beverly, which is his theater, the first theater he bought in town. The New Beverly, for almost, I think the first of the year maybe, there's like literally he's just doing a Schlockfest screening. He's doing his Grindhouse, and that's where he grew up. That's where that's what he lives on. And I think that that's so apparent in all his stuff. But Reservoir Dogs is such an amazing stamp of approval of like, I'm here. These are the movies I'm going to make. You can either be on board with it or like, spend your entire time with the Parents Council trying to get them unmade. Like, I don't really care. Mm-hmm. Like, it is this really fascinating. It is this really fascinating, like, especially I think it was 93, like 92. Like, it's this really interesting, like, fuck you to the entire system, but at the same time saying, I'm here to play ball, so let's do it. And like the ball he's playing though is like, give me whatever money you want, but I'm going to make my movie.
It was also one of the first times I felt like people my age were really like picking sides. Like, we were following directors like we did comic book characters.
Yeah. Oh, totally.
And it was just a strange, unusual time, but the stuff we were getting was just so wonderful, man. Mm-hmm. I got a funny story though. They talk about how Lady E in this movie, she glued this guy's dick to his stomach. So when I went, my brother graduated from Indiana University, right? I flew home from California to go party with him.
Right.
And he had met this girl, right? He got his heart broken. This fucking sack of shit cheated on him. And he ended up, his roommates, the girl his roommate was dating and him started dating, right? They'd both been cheated on by their significant others, right? So like this foursome had switched and now it's just the two of them left. And so I was leery, right? Spoiler alert, this woman is now my sister-in-law, right? But I was like, all right. I was like, I know what I'm here for, right? I'm coming for the walk ceremony, but what I'm here for is as soon as we take the robe and tassel hat off, I'm going hard in the paint, right? I'm bringing back college griff. I'm going to take this lady into the deep waters and see how she hangs. And much to my sister-in-law's credit, she looked me dead in my fucking beady, heartless eyes and just said, let's fucking rage. And so we're getting fucking drunk and stoned, whatever. And I was like, I need to go to the gas station and buy some Four Locos and cigarettes. It was one of those kind of nights.
Perfect.
And she just was like, I'll come with you. We walk down there and we meet this lady that, and this day I'm pretty impaired, so I don't remember the specifics of all the scenario.
Right.
They say she was a homeless lady, right? Somehow. Well, I got in my mind, I'm like, come back to the house with us. Her name was Deborah, right? This wild old lady. And she just was a fucking ball of fire. So my brother and all his little normie friends were like, what's happening? And I was like, come up on the porch. Let's fucking get weird. So we're just smashing Four Locos or Mad Dogs or Box. I can't remember what we're drinking, right? Anything we get our hands on.
Right.
Chain smoking cigarettes. And this lady's telling us her life story. She told me almost this exact story, right? She was living with the guy. He wasn't paying his rent. She found out he was skipping work to fuck some side piece. And when he fell asleep, and these were her exact words, I glued that dirty motherfucker's booty hole together. And I went, what? And she's like, yeah, I super glued his entire fucking ass trench, pressed his meat together. And so his entire fucking butt and butthole were just this fucking impenetrable wall.
Oh my God.
Of super glue. And I was like, what? And she's like, yeah, he woke up screaming that it burned, and I cried. I called him a bitch, and I was like, wait, what? And we to this day have no idea how the story ended. Because what happened is I told this lady, I was like, come back in the morning, we'll go have breakfast. And she came back, and I had been asleep for like 20 minutes at 7:30 a.m. And I said, Deborah, last night was wonderful, but we'll never talk again. Please, I'm dying. Leave me alone. So I never got the end of the tale at my Reservoir Dogs style breakfast with her. But she glued this motherfucker's booty hole shut. So guys, don't be cheating. Treat your girlfriends and boyfriends nice, guys. These are whores that are real. This is not a Quentin Tarantino thing. This happens in the real fucking world. We got to talk about, before we get out of here, the final standoff, man. Amazingly tense filmmaking going on here.
Yes.
Amazingly tense, especially since we know exactly who did it, right? We know who the fucking rat is now. What do you make of Mr. White putting it all on the line for this fucking kid, and why? This is a moment that I felt was much stranger than I remembered.
Yeah, it's weird you say that because I agree. I've never been able to pinpoint why. Like, when I was younger, I chalked it up to like the exuberance of like, yeah, there's a good kid right here. Like, you're just doing, I don't know, your thiefly duty to make sure somebody survives.
Wait, I thought there was no honor amongst these. That's fine.
Apparently there's honor now amongst these, but I agree though. Like, it is a very weird moment, and watching it today, I'm not sure I came to a resolution that made sense to me. Like,
Yeah.
I kept going back to the second or third time I watched him. Like, is it just like he's a good kid and he wants to see him survive, or like I thought, like, I did the swimming today, and I'm like, is he in on it? Maybe he's another cop in on it. Like, I could not tell you.
I feel like the ending. This is the thing, right? Because I think they do a good job when he's doing his commode speech, right?
Right.
You see Chris Penn like, you had a bag full of pot at the train station. So they set up the fact that Chris Penn already feels like this guy was full of shit, right?
Right.
Eddie, fucking leisure suit Eddie, right?
Nice guy, Eddie.
Yeah, he kind of knows this guy's full of shit, right? Which sets up a really nice thing at the end. The fact that at the end the old timer comes in and he's like, he's the only one I wasn't 100% on, right? I know it was him.
Right.
The fact that Mr. White doesn't trust him is very strange, right? What I came to, though, I think it might be a much simpler in my mind, right? Imagine the fucking world that these guys have occupied over the course of this film, right? A cop who's fucking murdered a second ago, the ears sliced off, everything's so uncertain. Mr. White has banked himself on one truth, that him and this kid were in it together, and he's going to save this kid. And I was like, was this as simple? And if it is, I think it's kind of brilliant, actually, right? Is it as simple as just this guy had one thing he believed all day, and he couldn't stand to have the last truth ripped out from under him? In his mind, he just
That's
knew.
interesting. I like that.
Because the old man tells him the exact line, right? You don't need proof when you got instincts. And in that moment, maybe he hardens his friend, and his friend's like, I fucking know this guy's good. We were in this together. Maybe.
I mean, it's a nice sentiment. I'll agree with you there. Like,
I don't know if it's there, because it is the weirdest thing in the movie to me.
I'm not sure. I'm on board. Like, I understand what you're getting at. And it makes sense to me. I think the hardest part about it is just it's such a weird, again, like,
yeah.
I think that's what makes this movie so unique and such a fascinating first outing, is because when you get there at that last moment, you've forgotten about as much as you've remembered for this movie. And like, you almost forget that one guy, like, that one guy's a cop, and yet it almost does not matter, because this guy is he's set the whole fucking thing up, man.
Mm-hmm.
I think what's really fascinating about the way this movie ends is because it's like Harvey Keitel's the only honorable character.
Another question for you. At the end, when Harvey Keitel's doing the he's essentially like the first water boy. Right? When Tim Roth is like in his lap. It was kind of a weird, because Tim Roth just goes, I'm sorry, I'm a cop, right? And you hear him start going, Mama's not Henri, right? And he's getting all fucking furious. I was like, twofold, right? Why did Tim Roth not just fucking let him have one? Right? Because he said cops were closing in 2 blocks away, which is a really weird thing to add in the script, right? Whatever. Do you think Harvey Keitel shoots him at the end? It's only Harvey Keitel on screen. He's got the gun to his chin. We hear the drop it. And he just rolls off screen as we hear bullets. I was trying to listen to the timing of the bullet sounds. I was like, did he shoot that motherfucker for being a cop?
I think he rolls behind him to use him as cover.
He MacGruber's him. You fucking rat.
I've actually always assumed that. Since like the first screening, I remember thinking, like, does he just like let him human shield He's like, fuck you.
I always wonder, because there's a line early when he goes, she had a baby. He tries to tell Mr. White that he has a kid, right? And that's one of the things they keep sprinkling through the movie is Mr. White always wants to use his name, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like he wants that human connection. So I don't know if I in my mind I think he shot or not.
I think it is as simple as just as simple as like you like the kid. I know that's weird and that seems like really anti.
That's a lot of liking.
I think that's really anti-profundity for a Quentin Tarantino type thing, but I also think Occam's razor exists in this movie, and that seems like the simplest solution.
They feel very real guys, right? So like there is something to.
And like you found out, like they had chatted earlier, like a few days ago, you had found out where he was from.
About the Brewers, yeah.
And
my mighty Milwaukee Brewers, yes.
Like there's a rapport between the two of them, so maybe it is as simple as like, and who knows? He also could be like, oh, this kid's fucking delirious. He thinks he's a cop. Whatever. What could possibly, like? There's any number of permutations to this, but I do think truly it just ends up being. You look out for this kid who's gut shot, who clearly just you feel bad.
You do, and it's so funny because I was talking to Amy, right? We're out doing Christmas shopping today and whatever the fuck. And I was like, yeah, I got to watch Kung Fu Hustle and Reservoir Dogs to record tonight. And she goes, ugh, Reservoir Dogs. I was like, what? And Amy just went so hard. She's like, that movie sucks. I was like, Reservoir Dogs sucks? And she goes, yeah, or I think her critique was, it's the most pointless movie I've ever seen. They just yell a bunch and then everyone dies. And I was like, yeah, I remember that. And she goes, why do I care about that? She's like, what a pointless movie. And I was like, Jesus Christ, Amy, like, I got to talk about this fucking thing. I will say, having watched, I do disagree with her, right? I think you could argue that it's very masturbatory, right? Sure. This is definitely I'm just showing off. I'm showing out, right? As they say in sports terms, because, we're sportsmen. We're men of sport.
We're very
showing out, right? Yeah, it definitely takes its time and plays with itself, right? And it always just wants to be cool and fun and entertaining. I don't think it's pointless though, right? I found that tension and that man under these, colored monikers, right? I really found a lot to sink my teeth into in this movie, right?
Agreed. Yeah,
I thought the acting was so good. The writing was so good. It's always fun to go back and see where directors start. And this is one of the upper echelon first movies, I would argue. It's a movie that really changed everything after it. So I somewhat take her point that it's not perhaps as satisfying a journey as you could get, right? Like a lot of movies like this, it's like The Thief with the Heart of the Gold, or are we going to watch them get their just desserts? Does anyone feel like they got rightly punished?
Right.
No, whatever. Like, but I don't agree that this is a pointless film, as my wife said. Not to just throw her out for the Tarantino bros to just start throwing elbow drops. Joke's on you. My wife's not on the internet. She's a fucking old-timey pioneer.
It's all right. She's on our Discord, so we can start. They lob haymakers at the Discord. So join the Patreon if you want to see that.
Yeah, come have my wife tell me that songs from the Highlander soundtrack sound like you two. You guys see why I'm so surly and wild when we do these shows. But yeah, so to wrap up Reservoir Dogs, man, it was an absolute treat to go back.
Yeah.
And take in this movie. I mean, again, this is one of those, I think a lot of us that were at the right age at the right time, this is just one of these seminal movies. And I think a lot of people went on, and Pulp Fiction was, I think a pretty inarguably better movie than this, right? It really amped up all the stuff that he was great at.
It's not even a matter of like better. It's just, you just see the progression. Like,
right.
It's someone was giving you more money to do more things, so you did it. And like, again, it's a different movie. It's a progression. That's like that's what makes Pulp Fiction, but this is what makes Reservoir Dogs.
Yeah.
Wait, I do have one bit. I do have one bit of trivia because we have asked. Apparently, people do like when we have production notes. I do have one thing I want to tell you.
Hit me.
The movie would be so different with a different cast. So, yes. Quentin Tarantino originally wrote Mr. Pink for himself, which would have been rough. Steve Buscemi originally auditioned for Mr. White.
Ugh.
Michael Madsen originally auditioned for Mr. Pink.
Ugh. What?
Here's the big one. George Clooney read for Mr. Blonde.
That I kind of like.
Don't hate.
Now, see, that is exactly what we went on to see in From Dusk Till Dawn.
Exactly.
And he crushes in that role.
So he read for Mr. Blonde, but turned it down.
Fucking rube. He wanted that Roseanne money.
And Christopher Walken flat out refused the role.
Christopher Walken was going to do Mr. Blonde?
Flat out refused.
That actually could have been awesome. I think there's something about Michael Madsen, though. He just has this... He looks like 1950s super cool guy. And he talks so low and distinct. Like, it's very... He has this,
it's very specific.
It's like the snake you know is charming. You're like, fuck, I don't want to get eaten by this snake, but it's got hypnosis. No, I hate almost everything you just said. Like, I hate almost every word you said.
Samuel L. Jackson auditioned for the role of Mr. Orange. Which I don't think that would have... I actually would have much rather...
He's too badass.
He's too badass. Like, there's no way he would have got gut shot. Just not a chance.
He's just too tough. Yeah, I don't... Yeah. I hate all that. I'm glad we got the movie we got.
But I had to tell you because, yeah, I'm glad the movie we got was so good.
It's a great movie, man. And again, I know if you're a younger audience member watching it, you're going to hear a lot of shit that you don't like anymore. So, given that, if you can get through that, it's a fucking wonderful free film school right there. That's what Tarantino said, right? I didn't go to film school. I went to films.
He said he was the least experienced person on set.
Yeah, you could learn a lot just by watching Tarantino films, including Reservoir Dogs. Thank you, Edith, for the pick. One more of Edith's movies coming up. We need to talk about Kevin. Perhaps the worst day of anyone in this month of bad days. Guys, please go to the Patreon. Patreon.com/FilmAlchemistPod. A wonderful way to help the show. Every single dollar is appreciated.
Come berate Amy for her horrible
my
choices.
Wife and her wild ass takes that make me the surly bastard you all love. Guys, you can get into our community for as little as $1, man. Every dollar is appreciated. See what we're working on, man. We're going to work hard to earn your support. So again, that's patreon.com/FilmAlchemistPod. You can pick the movies you want us to talk about, man. Force the hand.
Why not?
For a little bit of a donation. So thank you guys. The YouTube is Film Alchemist. The email is filmalchemistpod@gmail.com. Find us on all the socials. Leave us a 5-star rating and review wherever you find the show. Make sure to share the show on your socials with your pals, with your Reservoir Dogs and cats. More than anything, guys, thanks for starting your year off right with us. 2022 is going to be wild. Hopefully it's not going to have at us like a virgin style like 2020 and 2021 did. Can we just take it easy? Can we talk it easy time? For the Film Alchemist, I'm Josh Griffey.
I'm Alex Dandino.